You will surrender the chapel keys, your household authority, and Lucy before sunset. Julian Blackthorne's command carried through the family chapel so clearly that even the servant standing beyond the open doors heard it. Lady Eleanor remained beside the memorial table, one hand resting near the final candle she had lit for his father. Their 12-year-old niece, Lucy, stood behind her. Lucy is not a possession to be surrendered, Eleanor said. No, she is an heiress whose guardian stands accused of stealing the document that protects her inheritance. A murmur passed through the mourners. Eleanor saw Lord Felix Blackthorne lower his eyes with carefully measured sorrow. Julian's cousin had arrived 2 weeks before the old Duke's death and had scarcely left the chapel archives since. Julian extended his hand. The keys. 7 years earlier, his father had placed those keys in Eleanor's care because she could recognize every hand, seal, and family reference in 3 centuries of Blackthorne records. Her own father, a country solicitor, had taught her to compare ink, paper fibres, corrections, and signatures before she was old enough to attend a London season. Now that knowledge had become evidence against her. "You searched my desk this morning," Eleanor said. "I ordered it searched, and found no will, because you had time to hide it." She held his gaze. "Open the archive and examine the seal. If I forged it, condemn me afterward." For one suspended moment, Eleanor saw doubt cross his face. Julian knew she had spent months restoring the late Duke's damaged papers. He knew she had once discovered an altered rent agreement that saved 3 tenant families from eviction. He also knew his father had trusted her judgment when illness made his own hand unsteady. Julian could have delayed the accusation. He could have turned 20 paces, unlocked the archive, and looked. Instead, he glanced toward Felix. His cousin gave the smallest shake of his head. "The family has endured enough spectacle," Julian said. "I will not permit you to create another." The words struck harder because they carried an older wound. Their infant son had died 18 months earlier, and Julian had never forgiven Eleanor for refusing the physician's final treatment. She had believed the dose too strong. He had called her refusal pride. Neither of them had spoken honestly of that night since. Eleanor removed the heavy iron ring from the ribbon at her waist. One key after another fell onto the silver memorial tray. The chapel door, the archive room, the widow's trust chest, and the small vestry cupboard where Lucy's guardianship papers were kept. A 5th key landed among them. It was brass, narrow-stemmed, and stained near the teeth with fresh white candle wax. Eleanor went still. She had never seen it before. Felix stepped forward before she could touch it. 5 keys, just as the inventory states. The inventory states 4. His hand paused above the tray. Julian noticed. "Are you certain?" "I wrote the inventory myself." Felix recovered quickly. "Then perhaps your memory is less reliable than you believe." Eleanor looked at the brass key again. Someone had played it matching on her ring. Someone who expected the entire household to witness its discovery. "Where does it belong?" she asked. Felix lifted it between 2 fingers. "That is what we shall determine." Julian turned to the family steward. "Escort Lady Eleanor to the West Lodge. She will remain there until the will is recovered." Lucy seized Eleanor's hand. "I am going with her." "No," Julian said. The child's fingers tightened. Eleanor felt them trembling. Julian had agreed to become Lucy's legal guardian after her parents died, but Eleanor had raised the girl for 6 years. She had taught her to read, ridden beside her after nightmares, and sat awake through every winter fever. The old Duke's missing will was believed to place Lucy's maternal property in a separate trust administered by Eleanor until the girl reached 21. Without it, Julian controlled the guardianship, and Felix stood next in line to inherit if Lucy died unmarried. "Do not make her watch this," Eleanor said quietly. "You made her part of it when you concealed her grandfather's will." Lucy pulled away from Julian when he reached for her. "I will not forget this," the girl said. Julian's face changed, but only for an instant. "Take her upstairs." The governess led Lucy away. Her sob broke once beyond the chapel doors, then was smothered into silence. Eleanor refused to let the assembled mourners see her collapse. She removed the seal of household authority from her wrist and placed it beside the keys. Felix picked it up. That was the true transfer. She realized not merely keys, but access. The chapel, the trust chest, Lucy's papers, and every family record were now under the control of the man who had accused her. As Eleanor was escorted down the aisle, The late Duke's solicitor entered, carrying a black leather case. "Your Grace," Mr. Hale said, breathless. "The reading cannot proceed as Lord Felix arranged." Felix turned. "Why not?" "Because I received another instruction." The solicitor opened his case and withdrew a thin packet sealed in dark green wax. Eleanor recognized the color immediately. The late Duke had reserved it for documents that were to remain private until after his death. Written across the packet were 5 words: "To be opened if Eleanor is accused." Silence swallowed the chapel. Julian stared at the dead man's handwriting. "When did my father give you this?" 6 months ago." "That is impossible," Felix said. His mind was already failing. Mr. Hale broke the green seal. The first line contained neither a greeting nor a declaration of inheritance. It contained a question. "Has Felix shown my son the brass key yet?" Felix dropped the key onto the tray. It struck the silver with a sharp, betraying ring. Eleanor looked from the wax-stained key to the authority seal in Felix's hand. Her humiliation had not been the end of his plan. It had been the door he needed Julian to open. No one moved until the brass key stopped trembling on the tray. Julian reached for the green-sealed letter, but Mr. Hale folded it once and drew it back. "My instruction is to read this only in Lady Eleanor's presence." "She stands accused of stealing the principal will," Felix said. "Her presence compromises the proceeding." The late Duke anticipated that objection. Mr. Hale turned the page. "My daughter Eleanor is not to be expelled, confined, or separated from Lucy until every instruction in this packet has been obeyed." Julian's jaw tightened at the words, "my daughter." His father had used them often during the final year of his life, usually when praising the woman Julian had ceased to trust. "This proves nothing," he said. "My father may have suspected an accusation would arise. It does not establish Eleanor's innocence." "No," Eleanor replied, "but it establishes that Felix lied about the key." Every face turned toward him. Felix gave a thin smile. "I said it appeared on the inventory. You said just as the inventory states. Those were your exact words." "I was mistaken. You had not examined the key before identifying it." "I recognized it." "From where?" Felix's smile disappeared. Julian stepped between them. "Enough. Hale, continue." The solicitor read the next instruction. "The brass key opens neither a chapel door nor a family chest. Its lock was made for the person whose property Felix intends to seize first." "Lucy." Eleanor looked toward the chapel entrance through which the girl had been taken. The old Duke had known that an attack on the will would place Lucy in danger, yet he had hidden his warning inside a riddle. Perhaps he had feared someone was reading his correspondence. Perhaps the failing mind Felix described had been alert enough to recognize an enemy inside the house. "What property?" Julian asked. "The northern estate at Briar Glen," Felix answered quickly. "The land named in the missing will." Eleanor watched him. "Lucy owns more than land." Felix's eyes shifted toward her for less than a second. It was enough. The girl's maternal inheritance also contained a collection of small devotional paintings kept in a locked cabinet at the Dower House. Their sentimental value exceeded their beauty. Eleanor had inventoried them after Lucy's mother died, but only 3 people knew one painting concealed a folded marriage certificate behind its wooden backing. Eleanor had never told Felix. "Bring Lucy downstairs," she said. Julian's expression hardened. "You are in no position to issue commands." "Then command it yourself. Ask whether anyone has taken something from her room. You are attempting to frighten a child." "I am attempting to protect her." The old anger entered his face, the same anger that had divided them since their son's death. Whenever Eleanor questioned a physician, steward, or family relation, Julian heard judgment. He believed she trusted records more than people, and evidence more than him. That belief had made Felix's accusation easy to accept. Julian turned to the steward. "Bring Lucy." Felix caught his arm. "This humiliation has already gone too far." Julian looked down at the hand gripping his sleeve. Felix released him. While they waited, Eleanor studied the green packet from a distance. The paper was genuine Blackthorne stock, marked at the corner with a tiny flaw shaped like a crescent. She had ordered it herself. The late Duke's handwriting showed the uneven pressure of his final illness, but the letters remained deliberate. Then she noticed a narrow strip had been cut from the bottom of the second page. "Mr. Hale, was the packet damaged when you received it?" "No, I collected it from His Grace's bedside." and sealed it inside my case. May I see the lower edge? Julian gave a humorless laugh. Already searching for a flaw in the document that defends you. I am searching for what your father expected us to find. Mr. Hale held up the sheet. A single line remained above the cut. The missing strip names the first witness. Someone had opened the packet after the late Duke entrusted it to the solicitor, removed the witness's name, and resealed it without disturbing the outer wax. Mr. Hale went pale. My case remained locked. With what sort of key? Eleanor asked. He looked toward the silver tray, a narrow brass one. The chapel doors opened. Lucy entered with her governess, clutching an empty velvet case against her chest. Her eyes found Eleanor first. Aunt Eleanor, the little painting Mother gave me, is gone. Felix moved toward the child. When did you last see it? Eleanor stepped between them. Lucy looked past her and pointed directly at Felix. This morning. Before Lord Felix told me grandfather had left me nothing. Julian's face lost its colour. Felix did not retreat. The child is grieving. She misunderstood. No, Lucy said. You also said Aunt Eleanor would be gone before nightfall. The silence that followed was no longer uncertain. It was watchful. Julian looked at the cousin to whom he had just granted the chapel, the archives, and Lucy's guardianship papers. Still, he did not revoke the order. Eleanor will remain at the West Lodge, he said. Lucy will remain in the main house, under my protection. Until the original will is found, no one leaves the estate. Eleanor felt the last hope she had carried for her marriage bend beneath the weight of his choice. You heard your father warn you, she said. You heard Lucy identify the threat, yet you are still giving Felix access to her. I am preserving order. No, Julian, you are preserving your pride. She turned to Lucy and placed both hands around the girl's cold fingers. Listen carefully. Do not eat or drink anything brought by Lord Felix. Do not open your door after the candles are extinguished. If anyone tries to move you, scream. Julian stared at her. You think she is in physical danger? And I think the stolen painting contained proof that someone desperately needs destroyed. The steward escorted Eleanor from the chapel. This time, she walked out without lowering her head. At the West Lodge, she found the rooms stripped of writing paper, sealing wax, and every book she had used to manage the estate. Even the bell pull had been cut, so she could not summon a servant. Yet on the hearth sat a basket from one of the soldiers' widows whose pension Eleanor had protected. Beneath the bread was a folded list of trust payments recorded in Eleanor's own hand. One entry had been altered. For 6 months, money intended for the widows had been redirected to repairs at the family crypt. But no repairs had ever been performed. Eleanor turned the page over. On the back, the late Duke had written 3 words in green ink. Count the coffins. At that moment, the chapel bell began to ring. Once, twice, then Lucy screamed from inside the house. Eleanor ran toward the house before the final echo of Lucy's scream left the chapel tower. The steward caught her at the lodge gate. His Grace ordered you to remain here. Then you may explain to him why you restrained me while a child was in danger. He released her. Eleanor crossed the courtyard with her skirts gathered in both hands. The chapel bell rang again, not in the measured pattern used for worship, but in frantic, uneven blows. Julian reached the main staircase at the same moment she did. Lucy, he shouted. She was taken toward the chapel, the governess cried from the upper landing. A footman brought a message saying Lady Eleanor had been injured. Lucy ran before I could stop her. And what footman? I could not see his face. Julian looked at Eleanor. Did you send for her? No. Felix entered from the passage leading to the archives. This is precisely why Eleanor should be confined. Her warnings frightened the girl into recklessness. Eleanor caught the smell of extinguished candle wax on his coat. Where were you when she screamed? In the archive room, with the key Julian gave you, performing the duty he assigned me. Another cry came from behind the chapel. Eleanor ran through the vestry passage and found Lucy crouched beside the stone steps leading down to the family crypt. A man in a servant's coat was struggling with the iron door. When he saw them, he fled around the chapel wall. Julian pursued him, but the man vaulted the low cemetery fence and disappeared among the trees. Eleanor dropped beside Lucy. Are you hurt? Lucy shook her head and held up the bell rope. I pulled it because you told me to scream. You did exactly right. He said you had fallen inside the crypt. When I would not go down, he tried to take my locket. Eleanor touched the small silver locket at Lucy's throat. It had belonged to the girl's mother. Did he open it? No, I bit his hand. Despite her fear, Eleanor almost smiled. Then he chose the wrong child. Julian returned alone. Mud marked his boots, and anger darkened his face. Did you see him clearly? He asked Lucy. He wore the lower half of his face covered. Felix appeared at the top of the steps. A thief, perhaps. There have been vagrants near the North Road. No common thief would know how to lure Lucy with Eleanor's name, Julian said. It was the first time he had challenged his cousin. Felix's eyes narrowed before concern returned to his face. Then, Eleanor's accusations may have inspired someone inside the household. Eleanor rose. You were not in the archive. I beg your pardon? The passage from the archive to this door is dusty. Your shoes are clean. Felix looked down. Julian noticed the contradiction, but grief and pride still held him in place. He may have used the main corridor. Then why does his coat smell of the candle wax found on the brass key? Felix gave a short laugh. We have spent the morning in a chapel, filled with candles, and yet no one else smells as though he extinguished one against his sleeve. Julian's gaze moved between them. Then he took Lucy's hand. She is safe. That is what matters. Eleanor could hardly believe him. She was almost dragged into the crypt. And I will double the guard. You gave Felix control of those guards. I gave him temporary authority over the records, not over Lucy. The household seal in his hand says otherwise. Felix lifted his chin. Your Grace, this public dispute weakens every command you issue. There it was, the pressure Julian feared most. Disorder, public uncertainty, the possibility that his servants might see him, hesitate. Julian chose authority over truth once more. Eleanor returned to the lodge. No, the single word stopped him. She took Lucy's locket and examined its clasp. Fresh scratches crossed the silver edge. Someone had tried to force it open before the girl escaped. Eleanor pressed the hidden spring beneath the hinge. The locket opened into two shallow halves. One held a miniature portrait of Lucy's mother. Behind it lay a tiny square of yellowed paper. Lucy stared. I never knew that was there. Neither had Eleanor. She unfolded it carefully. It was not part of the missing will. It contained only a row of numbers written in the late Duke's hand. Lo. Below them was the outline of 4 rectangles. Coffins, Lucy whispered. Count the coffins. Eleanor looked toward the crypt door. Julian saw the message. It may be a burial record. No. Your family numbers graves by names, never figures. Felix descended 1 step. Give it to me. Eleanor closed her fingers around the paper. You no longer have authority to withhold family evidence, he said. This was hidden inside Lucy's property. It belongs to her. Julian held out his hand. I will keep it. Eleanor wanted to refuse. She had trusted him with the truth twice that morning, and twice he had handed power to Felix. But if she openly kept the paper, he could use it to justify formal confinement. She tore the numbered strip in half along its existing fold. Felix lunged forward. Eleanor placed 1 half in Julian's palm and slipped the other behind the miniature in Lucy's locket. Now neither side can use it without the other. For the first time that day, Felix lost control of his expression. His anger lasted only a heartbeat, but Eleanor saw it. So did Julian. Why does that trouble you? She asked Felix. It does not. Then you will not object when we count the coffins. The crypt should not be disturbed before the memorial week is over. You were trying to open it when we arrived, Lucy said. Felix turned on her. That is a lie. The words struck the child like a slap. Julian stepped forward. Do not speak to her that way. Felix lowered his head. Forgive me. This morning has tested us all. Eleanor put Lucy behind her. She had won something small but vital. Julian had challenged Felix, and Lucy still possessed half the clue. A maid approached, carrying a tray of tea. Eleanor noticed a plain bone button lying near 1 cup. It matched the buttons on the coat worn by the masked servant. Where did you find that? Eleanor asked. On the archive stairs, Your Grace. Felix's hand moved toward his own coat pocket. Eleanor picked up the button first. 4 tiny holes pierced its center, but one contained a thread of bright blue silk. The household servants wore brown thread. Felix's personal valet repaired his master's clothes with blue. She closed her hand around the button. Felix looked at her, and all pretense of grief vanished from his eyes. Until that moment, He had considered Eleanor a disgraced wife who could be isolated and blamed. Now he understood that she was the only person in Blackthorne Hall capable of reconstructing what he had done, and Eleanor understood something in return. Lucy's missing painting, the numbered coffins, and the stolen will were not 3 crimes. They were one. Felix reached for the bone button. Eleanor closed her fingers around it. "You have already taken enough from this household." Julian stepped between them before Felix could answer. "Give the button to me. Will you keep it where your cousin cannot reach it?" His expression hardened. Must every request become an insult? No, only the requests that require me to trust the man who condemned me without examining the evidence. Lucy watched them from behind Eleanor's shoulder. The child's presence kept Julian from replying, with the anger rising in his face. "Place it in Mr. Hale's custody," he said. That was not trust, but it was not surrender either. Eleanor handed the button to the solicitor. Mr. Hale wrapped it in a clean handkerchief and wrote the time, place, and names of everyone present on the outside. He sealed the bundle with his personal stamp. Felix observed the procedure in silence. "The crypt will remain closed," Julian announced. "No one enters until I summon the magistrate tomorrow." Eleanor looked at the iron door. Then, "Post guards, who do not answer to Felix. I will choose them myself." Felix's mouth tightened. The first confrontation ended without an arrest, but Felix was given no time to recover. Before Julian could issue the order, a servant ran from the direction of the dower house. "Your Grace, smoke is coming from the old gallery," Lucy gasped. "My mother's paintings." Eleanor ran. The dower house stood beyond the orchard, its upper windows dark beneath a rising column of grey smoke. 2 maids struggled with buckets while a footman struck uselessly at the locked gallery door. "Where is the key?" Eleanor demanded. "On the chapel ring," the housekeeper said. The ring now belonged to Felix. He arrived with Julian moments later and searched his pockets. "The gallery key is missing." "Because it was removed before the ring was planted on me," Eleanor said. Smoke curled beneath the door. Julian threw his shoulder against it. The frame held. Eleanor remembered the building plans she had restored after a winter flood. The gallery shared a narrow service passage with the linen room, sealed years earlier when the dower house was closed. She seized a brass candlestick and shattered the thin panel at the back of a cupboard. Heat rushed through the opening. "Eleanor, wait," Julian ordered. She crawled inside. Smoke burned her throat and erased the corridor ahead. She kept one hand against the wall until her fingers found the inner latch. When the gallery door opened, Julian pulled her into the orchard air. Servants formed a bucket line. The flames had not yet reached the ceiling, but they were spreading across a table covered with papers and empty frames. Eleanor wrapped her shawl around her hands and dragged the nearest stack away from the fire. Felix entered behind her. "Save the paintings." "There are no paintings," she shouted, "only the frames." Someone had removed Lucy's entire maternal collection before setting the room alight. A burning beam dropped between them. Julian pushed Eleanor aside and struck the flames from her skirt. For one breath, they stood close enough to remember another life, the man who had once waited outside her father's office with rain in his hair, and the woman who had believed he would always listen when truth mattered. Then Felix emerged, carrying a small wooden chest. "I found the trust papers," he called. The servants cheered as he delivered it into Julian's hands. Eleanor stared at the chest. It had been kept in the chapel vestry, not the dower gallery. Felix had brought it with him. He had placed it inside the burning room so he could appear to rescue it. "Open it," Eleanor said. Felix coughed into his sleeve. "The fire is not yet contained. Then it cannot have damaged the papers." Julian lifted the lid. Inside lay the pension records for the soldiers' widows and a leather account book bearing Eleanor's initials. Felix opened the book to a marked page. "There," he said, "payments for crypt repairs, authorized by Lady Eleanor." Every altered entry carried a neat imitation of her signature. The household fell silent. The fire Eleanor had prevented from consuming the dower house had revealed the very documents Felix intended to use against her. Yet by carrying the chest into public view, he had made himself appear the saviour and her the thief. Julian looked at her through the drifting smoke. "Did you authorize these payments?" "No. The signatures resemble yours. They resemble what Felix believes my signature looks like." Felix gave a weary sigh. "Even now, she accuses me." Eleanor held out her hand. "Let me examine the page." Julian hesitated, then passed her the book. Eleanor tilted the signature toward the light. What color do you see at the edge, Mr. Hale? A faint violet. Because the forger used iron gall ink mixed with logwood. I stopped ordering it 2 years ago. Felix folded his arms. Anyone could claim that. The estate stationer records every purchase, Eleanor replied. Find the person who ordered the ink, and you will find the person who copied my name. Felix shook his head. A convenient claim. The estate stationer keeps every order. I am certain you will find a reason those records cannot be trusted, either. Eleanor turned several pages. You made another mistake. She pointed to a payment dated the 12th of March. That day, I was not at Blackthorne Hall. I was in York, settling the pension of a soldier's widow. Mr. Hale witnessed the agreement. The solicitor nodded. I did. One of the women in the bucket line stepped forward. She was the widow who had hidden the payment list beneath Eleanor's bread. Her Grace stayed in my cottage that night, she said. My youngest boy had a fever. She would not leave us. 2. Julian looked at Eleanor. You never told me. You had stopped asking where I went. The answer landed between them with greater force than accusation. Felix closed the account book. A single date proves only that someone recorded a payment on her behalf. With her authority? Julian asked. Of course. Then why imitate her signature? Felix did not answer immediately. Eleanor saw the exact moment he chose his next attack. He turned toward Lucy. The girl should not remain with a woman facing accusations of theft and endangerment. Until this is resolved, she ought to be sent to my sister's house in Bath. Lucy seized Eleanor's burned hand. Eleanor did not pull away, though pain shot to her wrist. No, she said. Julian's eyes dropped to their joined hands. Lucy remains here tonight, he decided. Tomorrow, after the magistrate arrives, I will determine her guardianship. Eleanor understood the threat. If the forged account book was accepted, she could lose Lucy permanently. She stepped closer to Julian and lowered her voice. The stationer's receipts are stored in the blue cabinet inside your father's private study. Examine them tonight. Compare the ink orders with the dates in that book. Do it yourself before Felix can touch them. Julian looked toward his cousin, then back at her. For the third time, the truth stood within his reach. All he had to do was open a cabinet before morning. Julian entered his father's study before midnight and found the blue cabinet unlocked. The stationer's receipts were gone. Only a smear of purple-black ink remained across the empty shelf. Felix appeared in the doorway carrying a candle. You see now why Eleanor wanted you to search alone. Julian turned. How did you know I was here? The steward told me. No, I gave him no instruction. Felix paused, then looked toward the vacant cabinet. Does that matter more than what she has done? Julian pressed his thumb against the ink. It was still damp. Someone had removed the receipts within the last hour. Eleanor was under guard at the West Lodge. She could not have entered the house without being seen. Julian knew it. Yet, accepting that truth meant admitting he had handed Felix every key required to destroy the evidence. She may have ordered a servant to take them, Felix said. Which servant? Someone loyal to her. Half the estate mistakes her kindness for authority. Julian looked at the purple stain again. His father's green-sealed warning returned to him. Has Felix shown my son the brass key yet? For the first time, Julian allowed himself to ask why the dead Duke had feared his own nephew. Then the memory of his dying child intruded the physician, begging Eleanor to permit one final dose, Eleanor refusing, and silence filling the nursery before dawn. He had trusted her judgment then. Their son had died. Julian closed the cabinet. Wake the steward, he said. No servant leaves the house before the magistrate arrives. Felix bowed his head, hiding his relief. By sunrise, the missing receipts had been turned into another accusation against Eleanor. She was brought back to the chapel under guard. Her burned hand had been wrapped in linen, but no physician had been permitted to visit the lodge. Lucy ran toward her. Felix caught the girl by the shoulder. Stand beside your guardian. She is my guardian. Not for long. Julian stood before the memorial table, with the magistrate at his right and Mr. Hale at his left. On the silver tray lay the forged account book, the brass key, and the sealed bone button. Eleanor searched Julian's face. You opened the cabinet. I did. And the receipts. Tex. Missing. She glanced at Felix. Because he reached them first. Felix stepped forward. The cabinet was unlocked. Lady Eleanor was the last known person to use it. I have been imprisoned in the West Lodge. The receipts may have been removed before yesterday. The ink on the shelf was wet, Julian said. Eleanor looked back at him. Hope rose painfully in her chest. Then you know. I know someone entered the study. Someone with authority over the household. Felix addressed the magistrate. Her Grace has spent years cultivating personal loyalty among the servants. Any one of them might act for her. The soldier's widow, who had defended Eleanor the previous day, stood near the chapel doors. When Eleanor met her eyes, the woman looked down. Felix noticed. "Tell His Grace what happened last night," he ordered. The widow's hands twisted in her apron. "A packet was found in my cottage." "What packet?" "The stationer's receipts." A guard placed a bundle of scorched papers on the memorial table. Eleanor stared at the woman. "You hid the payment list in my basket." Tears filled the widow's eyes. "They said they would end my pension. My children would have no bread." Felix had threatened the people Eleanor protected and forced one of them to place the stolen receipts where they would be found. The widow whispered, "Forgive me." "I do," Eleanor said. Felix struck the table with his palm. Her forgiveness is not evidence of innocence. It is how she purchases devotion. 10, 10, 10. Mr. Hale examined the scorched pages. "These are genuine stationer's receipts, but the entries for logwood ink have been destroyed." "Convenient," Julian said bitterly. Eleanor heard the exhaustion in his voice. He did not sound convinced of her guilt. That made his next choice worse, not better. The magistrate unfolded a prepared order. "Your Grace, the accusations involve misappropriation from a charitable trust, concealment of a testamentary document, and possible interference with a minor's inheritance. Until the matter is investigated, you may suspend the Duchess's household authority and restrict her access to estate records. Removing her from guardianship requires a separate petition." "Now mark." Felix placed another paper before Julian. "This temporary family arrangement sends Lucy to my sister in Bath until the petition is heard." Lucy shook her head. "I will not go." Eleanor stepped toward Julian. "Do not sign it. You cannot continue involving her in this danger. You created the danger when you gave Felix my keys." His face hardened. "And you created years of division by believing your judgment stood above everyone else's. This is not about our son. It is always about him." The chapel fell silent. Eleanor's composure broke for one unguarded moment. "I held him while he died, Julian. Do you believe I have passed a single night without asking whether I was wrong?" Pain crossed his face. She continued before fear could silence her. "The physician's bottle contained twice the safe measure. Your father found the original treatment records 6 months later. He tried to show you, but Felix told you the old man was confused." Julian turned sharply toward his cousin. Felix answered at once. "She is using a dead child to escape judgment." "No," Eleanor said. "You used his death to keep my husband from trusting me." Julian's hand hovered above the temporary guardianship order. He could question Felix. He could postpone the decision. He could send Lucy to neutral relatives or place the girl beside Eleanor under independent protection. Instead, he took the pen. "Do not do this," Eleanor whispered. Julian signed. Lucy screamed and tried to reach her, but the governess held her back. Felix collected the order. With Julian's signature, he now possessed what the brass key alone could not give him: lawful control over Lucy's movements. Something inside Eleanor became still. She had spent 18 months trying to save what remained of her marriage. She had explained, waited, and forgiven every silence, because she believed grief had hidden the man Julian once was. Now she saw the truth. Grief had wounded him. Pride had made his choice. "I will no longer ask you to believe me," she said. "From this moment, I will protect Lucy from you as well as from Felix." Julian flinched. Felix ordered the carriage prepared for noon. As the guards led Eleanor away, Mr. Hale slipped beside her. "The green letter contained one final instruction," he murmured. "I did not read it aloud, because the witness's name had been cut away." "What instruction?" "Open the 4th coffin before the girl leaves Blackthorne." Eleanor looked toward the crypt. Across the courtyard, 2 men were loading travel trunks onto Lucy's carriage. One trunk bore Felix's initials. The second was long, narrow, and large enough to hold the stolen paintings. Then the chapel clock struck 11. Eleanor had 1 hour to enter the crypt, find whatever the late Duke had hidden, and stop Felix from taking Lucy beyond her reach. The carriage began moving at 11:15. Felix had not waited for noon. Eleanor saw Lucy strike the window with both hands, while two mounted guards closed around the carriage. Julian's signature was displayed beside the driver like a weapon. "Stop them!" Eleanor shouted. The courtyard guards blocked her path. "His Grace's order is lawful," the steward said, though shame made him unable to meet her eyes. Lord Felix changed the departure time. "We answer to the household authority," the authority Julian had placed in Felix's hands. Eleanor looked toward the chapel clock. 45 minutes remained before the hour specified in the late Duke's instruction, but Lucy was already being taken toward the south road. She could chase the carriage without proof and be arrested before reaching the gate. Or she could enter the crypt and find the evidence the late Duke had risked everything to preserve. "Send a rider to Julian," she told the soldier's widow. "Tell him Felix departed early." The woman nodded. "And you?" "I am going where his father told me to go." Lucy was already on the road, and Eleanor had less than an hour to find proof capable of stopping Felix. With the main crypt door guarded, she entered through the vestry and climbed toward the bell chamber. Fresh white wax marked the fibres, the same wax found on the brass key. Eleanor followed the rope downward with her eyes. It disappeared through a round opening in the floor, but beside it ran a second cord, thin and nearly invisible. When she pulled it, a section of wooden panelling released behind the bell frame. A stone stairway descended inside the chapel wall. The repairs charged to the soldiers' trust had not been made to the crypt. They had been used to construct a concealed entrance. Eleanor took a lantern and went down. The passage ended behind the fourth stone coffin. 6 more stood in 2 rows, each carved with the name of a Blackthorne ancestor. The numbers on Lucy's hidden paper, 4, 7, 3, 6, were not coffin numbers. They were the dates engraved beneath 4 names. Eleanor read the final digits aloud. 4, 7, 3, 6. She took the first letter of each ancestor's Christian name. A, R, S, T, East. The late Duke had pointed her toward the eastern wall. A small brass lock lay hidden inside the carved wing of an angel. Eleanor removed the narrow key from her pocket. She had taken it from the silver tray during the confusion at the Dower House fire and replaced it with a similar vestry key. Felix had been too eager to seize her authority seal to notice. The brass key turned. Part of the eastern wall opened into a low storage chamber. Lucy's missing paintings stood inside, stripped from their frames and wrapped in linen. Beside them were the stationer's undamaged receipts, the missing strip from the green letter, and 3 leather cases bearing seals from London creditors. Eleanor opened the first case. The document inside stated that Julian had pledged Briar Glen as security for a political loan. He could not legally pledge it if Lucy's mother had owned it separately. The second document claimed Lucy had no surviving proof of inheritance. The third granted Felix the right to purchase the estate for a fraction of its value if the loan failed. Julian had not merely lost control of Lucy's inheritance. By signing the guardianship order and allowing Felix to remove her, he had delivered the only person who could challenge the seizure into Felix's custody. A sound scraped behind Eleanor. The masked servant entered the chamber with a lantern in one hand and a pistol in the other. One button was missing from his coat. "You should have remained at the lodge," he said. Eleanor recognized the voice. Felix's valet had served at Blackthorne Hall for 6 months, yet Julian had allowed Felix to choose the men guarding Lucy. "You planted the receipts in the widow's cottage, and you taught poor people to value their children more than loyalty. It made the choice easy." He raised the pistol. Eleanor threw her lantern. It struck the floor between them. Oil spread across the stones and ignited. The valet fired blindly as Eleanor dropped behind the fourth coffin. The ball shattered a marble plaque above her. Smoke filled the chamber. The valet fled through the secret stairway, but before leaving, he pulled a lever beside the wall. A deep grinding sound shook the crypt. The fourth coffin slid away from its base. It was empty. Beneath it opened a tunnel wide enough to move paintings, document cases, and coffins without crossing the chapel. Flames raced along the oil toward the wrapped canvases. Eleanor tore off her overskirt and smothered the fire nearest the documents. She could not save everything. The paintings carried Lucy's family history. The creditor papers could stop the seizure. The pension records could clear Eleanor's name. She chose the creditor papers and the missing strip from the green letter. Then she dragged as many paintings as she could into the tunnel. A beam cracked overhead. "Eleanor!" Julian's voice came from beyond the eastern wall. He entered through the open panel with 2 servants. When he saw the flames, he pulled Eleanor away from the falling stone. Together, they escaped into the main crypt, seconds before the storage chamber collapsed. The crash split the floor. 2 ancestral coffins slid into the burning passage below. Centuries of memorials, records, and family relics vanished beneath smoke and stone. Julian stared at the destruction. My father's tomb. This is what Felix built with the money stolen from the widows, Eleanor said. He needed a route no servant would see. She placed the creditor papers in Julian's hands. He read the first page, then the second. His face changed as he understood. I never pledged Briar Glen. Your signature appears on the loan. Felix brought me several estate papers after father died. He said they concerned roof repairs, and you signed without reading them. Julian looked toward the empty 4th coffin. For once, he did not defend himself. A rider stumbled into the crypt. Your Grace, men from London have arrived at the North Gate. They carry an order to seize Briar Glen before sunset. Julian lifted his head. I will command them to leave. You cannot, Mr. Hale said from the doorway. The loan bears your seal, and Lady Lucy, through the order you signed this morning, is travelling under the control of the man named as purchaser. Julian's title could not undo his signature. His guards could not retrieve Lucy without challenging his own public command. His estate faced seizure because he had granted Felix access and refused to examine what he signed. Eleanor unfolded the strip cut from the late Duke's letter. The first witness was named there. The 4th coffin holds no body. Find the man who buried me. Below it was the name of the former chapel sexton. He left Blackthorne last winter, Julian said. Felix told me he stole church silver. Eleanor looked at the tunnel. No. Felix removed him because he knew what was carried through here. A servant rushed in from the courtyard. The South Bridge has been washed out. Lord Felix's carriage has turned toward Marsh Road. Mr. Hale went pale. That road ends at the old ferry. Eleanor knew the ferry schedule. The final crossing left at 1 o'clock. Once Lucy reached the opposite bank, Felix could place her in a hired coach and disappear before the magistrate issued any challenge. The chapel clock struck noon. Eleanor had 60 minutes to find the banished sexton, reach the ferry, and save Lucy from the consequence of Julian's signature. Eleanor refused Julian's carriage. The household horses answer to Felix's seal, she said. I will not place Lucy's rescue inside his control again. The soldier's widow brought Eleanor her late husband's mare from a cottage stable beyond the estate boundary. The animal was old, but steady, and the saddle carried no Blackthorne crest. Julian approached with his own horse. You cannot reach the ferry alone. I am not alone. The widow stood beside Eleanor, holding a wrapped bundle beneath one arm. Inside were the creditor papers, the green letter strip, and Mr. Hale's written record of where each item had been found. Julian lowered his voice. Whatever you believe of me, Lucy needs speed. She needed your protection this morning. I know. No, you know Felix deceived you. That is not the same as knowing what you did. The words stopped him. Eleanor tightened the reins with her uninjured hand. If you ride with us, you follow my instructions. You do not take the evidence. You do not speak for me. And if we reach Lucy, she chooses whether to return with you. Julian's face tightened at the final condition. Then he nodded. They rode toward the abandoned mill where the former sexton's sister had once lived. Eleanor knew the connection because she had managed the widow's trust, including a small payment made to the sexton's family after Felix dismissed him. Julian had never known. How many families did you support from that trust? He asked, as they crossed the North Field. 32. My father told me it served 12. It served 12 when I inherited its management. I recovered unpaid military pensions, sold unused hunting rights, and increased it without raising tenant rents. Why was none of that in the estate reports? It was. You stopped reading reports carrying my name. Julian looked away. They found the former sexton inside the ruined mill, his leg bound with a dirty strip of cloth. He reached for a knife when they entered. Felix said you would come, he told Eleanor. When? His valet arrived before dawn, offered me passage to France if I surrendered the burial ledger. When I refused, he broke my leg and searched the mill. Did he find it? The sexton shook his head. His late grace taught me never to hide truth in a place built to keep it. He pointed toward the mill wheel outside. Eleanor hurried to the mill wheel. Which part moves, even when the mill is abandoned? She asked. The paddles, Julian answered. 4 new nails marked one wooden paddle the same 4-hole pattern as the bone button. Julian pried it loose. An oilskin packet dropped into Eleanor's hands. The button was not merely evidence from the valet's coat, she said. It was the late Duke's direction to this hiding place. Julian helped pry away the paddle. Inside lay a narrow oilskin packet containing a burial ledger and a small wooden panel. Lucy's missing marriage certificate was fixed behind it. The sexton touched the page with shaking fingers. Lady Lucy's mother married her father in Scotland 6 months before their public ceremony. Briar Glen was settled upon her and her children there. Lucy's discovered the certificate after she died. Why hide it inside a painting? Julian asked. Because the late Duke believed Felix was searching the archives. He gave the proof to the child's mother, and she concealed it where only Lucy might inherit it. Eleanor placed the marriage certificate beside the final page of the burial ledger. Mr. Hale, hold them toward the window. He aligned the 2 cut edges. A single crown-shaped watermark appeared across both sheets. They were once part of the same paper, Julian said. Yes, Eleanor replied. Felix may imitate a signature, but he cannot create a mark divided between documents hidden in 2 different places. Mr. Hale wrapped both papers in oilskin. The widow and the sexton watched him seal the bundle, then signed their names across the fold. For the first time, he said, we possess proof Felix cannot dismiss as Eleanor's word alone. What does the empty coffin mean? She asked. The sexton's face darkened. 3 nights before the old Duke's funeral, Felix ordered the 4th ancestral coffin opened. He filled it with Lady Lucy's paintings, creditor papers, and bundles taken from the archive. Then he used the hidden tunnel to carry everything beneath the chapel. And my father's coffin? Julian asked. Felix intended to move it through the same passage after the funeral. Why? To retrieve the final will, hidden beneath the lining. Julian stared at him. My father placed the will inside his own coffin. He no longer trusted any living Blackthorne to guard it. Why did you not tell me? I tried. Lord Felix accused me of stealing church silver before I could reach you. You signed the dismissal order without hearing me. The truth struck Julian visibly. Eleanor saw his remorse, but she felt no urge to soften it. How many warnings did you sign away? She asked. He had no answer. The old sexton gripped Eleanor's wrist. Felix has not found the original will. The coffin he opened was empty, because he moved the wrong one. Which coffin holds the documents? His late grace changed the nameplate on the morning of his death. I alone knew the correct tomb. Then the will is still beneath the chapel, Julian said. And Felix needs Lucy, Eleanor replied. Her locket carries half the number sequence identifying it. Eleanor now possessed the witness and the documents she needed, but Felix still possessed Lucy. Distant bells sounded from the ferry road. One long ring, the signal that the boat was preparing to leave. Julian lifted the injured sexton onto his horse. Eleanor secured the marriage certificate and ledger inside the widow's bundle. They reached Marsh Road with less than 20 minutes remaining. At the crest of the final hill, Eleanor saw the ferry below. Felix stood on the landing beside Lucy, one hand clamped around the girl's arm. His carriage had been abandoned near the water. Lucy saw Eleanor and struggled. Felix drew a pistol from his coat. "Stop there!" he shouted. Eleanor dismounted, but did not step back. "We have the marriage certificate," she called. "Briar Glen belongs to Lucy. Your loan scheme has failed." End quote. Felix smiled. "Then you have brought me the only thing I still require." 2 riders emerged from the trees behind them. Felix's valet struck Mr. Hale from his horse. The second man seized the widow and tore the evidence bundle from her arms. Julian reached for his pistol, but Felix pressed the barrel of his own weapon against Lucy's temple. "Drop it." Julian obeyed. The valet carried the bundle onto the ferry and placed it in Felix's hands. The burial ledger, the matched certificate, and every written record of their discovery were now under his control. Felix pushed Lucy onto the boat. Before stepping aboard, he looked directly at Eleanor. "You taught me something today," he said. "A disgraced wife is dangerous only while someone still permits her to speak." He raised the green letter strip over the boatman's lantern. The paper caught fire. Then the ferry pulled away from the landing, carrying Lucy, the witness records, and their only authenticated proof toward the opposite bank. Felix burned the marriage certificate before the ferry reached the opposite bank. Eleanor watched the flame from the shore until the final black fragment vanished into the river. Julian stood beside her, motionless. "You signed the order that placed Lucy on that boat," Eleanor said. "I know. You gave Felix the guards who helped him take her. I know. And now he holds the burial ledger, Mr. Hale's record, and every paper proving what he did." Julian looked at the pistol he had dropped in the mud. "Tell me what remains." "The truth remains. Whether anyone will hear it depends upon what you are willing to lose." The former sexton pointed downstream. "The ferry cannot land at Briar Glen for another half-hour. The eastern bank is too shallow. They must follow the river road." A farm cart approached behind them. Eleanor stopped it and helped the injured sexton inside. Julian climbed onto the driver's bench, but she caught his sleeve. "If we reach the creditors, you do not protect the Blackthorne name." His face went still. "You tell them exactly what you signed, what you ignored, and whom you empowered. That may destroy my authority over the estate. Your authority has already been used to destroy others." He looked across the water toward Lucy. Then he handed Eleanor the Blackthorne signet ring. "Do with it what I should have done. Make every use of it answerable." She did not put it on. She sealed it inside Mr. Hale's empty evidence cloth and gave it to the widow. Half an hour later, the private chase became a public battle over Lucy's inheritance. They reached Briar Glen as the creditors assembled in the entrance hall. Felix stood beneath Lucy's maternal portrait, surrounded by 3 London agents and the magistrate who had followed from Blackthorne Hall. Lucy sat beside the window with Felix's valet behind her chair. When she saw Eleanor, relief crossed her face. Felix raised a document. "You arrived too late. The original will has been recovered." "Aye." The page carried the late Duke's signature and a green wax seal. It declared that Lucy's mother had possessed no separate title to Briar Glen. It also accused Eleanor of mismanaging the widow's trust and attempting to manufacture an inheritance for the child. The creditor's agent examined the seal. "It appears genuine." "It is not," Eleanor said. Felix smiled. "Her Grace now rejects the very handwriting she spent years claiming to understand." "Where did you find it?" "In the evidence bundle she tried to conceal. That bundle was taken from us at gunpoint." "By whose witness?" The valet stepped forward. "I saw Lady Eleanor give the papers to the widow and order her to flee. The widow protested, but a guard silenced her." Felix placed the burial ledger and the remains of the burned certificate on the table. The matching edges had been cut away. The watermark was gone. He had destroyed the authentication while preserving enough paper to suggest Eleanor had fabricated the claim. The magistrate turned to Julian. "Your Grace, do you recognize your father's seal?" Julian looked at the false will. Then he looked at Eleanor. "This proceeding exists because I placed authority in the hands of the wrong man," he said. Felix's smile faded. Julian continued. "I signed the loan papers without reading them. I signed Lady Eleanor's suspension after refusing to examine the chapel archive. I dismissed the former sexton without hearing his defence. And this morning, after receiving my father's warning, I gave Lord Felix lawful control of Lucy's journey." A shocked murmur moved through the hall. The creditor's agent frowned. "Are you disputing your own signatures?" "No, I'm admitting them. You understand that such negligence may render you unfit to administer the private properties associated with your title." "Yes." Felix stepped toward him. "Julian, stop." Julian removed his ducal chain of office. "Until the court determines the validity of these instruments, I surrender administration of the unentailed Blackthorne properties to independent trustees. I also pledge my London house as security against any loss suffered by Briar Glen." The admission cost him control, wealth, and public standing. It did not restore Eleanor's trust, but it prevented the creditors from seizing Lucy's home that afternoon. The magistrate raised a hand. "The property will remain sealed for 24 hours. Lady Lucy will be placed in neutral custody." Felix's valet tightened his grip on the back of Lucy's chair. "And Lady Eleanor?" Felix asked. He produced a second paper from the stolen bundle. It was a draft of the missing will written in Eleanor's hand. She recognized it. Years earlier, the late Duke had dictated possible clauses while she recorded them for his solicitor. Felix had removed the page from the archives and added a false final paragraph granting Eleanor control of Briar Glen. "Forgery," Felix said. "Motive, opportunity, and the document itself." The magistrate examined it. "Lady Eleanor, until this is resolved, You must remain under guard." Lucy cried out. Eleanor allowed the officer to take her arm. Resisting would only give Felix the chaos he wanted. Felix had lost immediate possession of Briar Glen, but before the creditors and magistrate, he appeared to have proved that Eleanor invented the inheritance scheme. Her liberty was restricted, her evidence destroyed, and Lucy was taken to a locked room under guards chosen by the court. As Eleanor was escorted away, Felix passed close enough to whisper, "Tomorrow they will open the coffin your witness names. They will find nothing but a dead duke and your final lie." Eleanor stopped. The former sexton had never named a coffin in Felix's presence. The stolen ledger recorded burials, not the changed nameplate. The green strip said only, "Fourth coffin," which Felix already knew was empty. Yet he believed he knew which tomb would be opened tomorrow. Eleanor remembered the old duke's method: never hide truth in a place built to keep it. Eleanor looked again at the wax on the brass key. The key opened the wall below, she said, but the same wax was found on the bell rope above. Mr. Hale understood first. The late Duke connected the bell chamber to the hidden tomb. Yes, and Felix knows which coffin will open. How can you prove that? By naming the wrong one tomorrow. She turned toward the chapel hill. If Felix corrects me, he will reveal knowledge that only the sexton and the person who entered the secret passage could possess. At noon, every chapel bench was occupied. The creditors sat near the altar. The household servants crowded the rear, while the magistrate stood beside the memorial table with Mr. Hale. Lucy had been placed between two neutral guards, and the injured sexton rested in a chair where everyone could see him. Eleanor entered under escort. Felix waited beside Julian's former place at the front of the chapel. He still carried the household authority seal Julian had given him. He attacked before Eleanor could speak. "Her Grace promised a confession," he announced. "Before she invents another mystery, the court should see what she has already done." His valet carried forward the draft found in Eleanor's handwriting. Felix displayed the false final paragraph, granting her control of Briar Glen. She prepared this document years ago, stole the true will after the Duke's death, and diverted charitable funds to construct a secret chamber where she could hide the evidence. When discovery approached, she set fire to the Dower Gallery and accused me. The narrative was simple. Eleanor possessed the necessary skill. Her handwriting appeared on the draft. Her initials marked the altered trust book. She had discovered the hidden chamber before anyone else and had been found carrying documents from it. Several servants looked uncertain. Felix turned toward Eleanor. "Do you deny writing this page?" "No." The chapel stirred. Julian took one involuntary step toward her, but she raised her bandaged hand. This was not his defense to give. "I wrote the first portion while the late Duke dictated possible clauses," she continued. The final paragraph was added later, an assertion without proof. Eleanor faced the magistrate. "May I ask Mr. Hale a question?" "Proceed." "Did the late Duke execute wills from preliminary drafts?" "Never. I prepared a clean legal copy after we agreed upon the language." "Would he have placed his seal on a page written by someone else?" "No." Eleanor held up the draft. "Then even if every word were mine, this could not be an executed will." Felix presented a working page, as though it were a finished legal instrument, because he expected handwriting to frighten the room more than procedure would persuade it. The magistrate examined the sheet again. Eleanor turned to the forged trust book. "The crypt payment, dated the 12th of March, carries an imitation of my signature. Where was I that night?" Mr. Hale answered. "At the widow's cottage near York. I witnessed the pension settlement." The widow stood. "She remained because my son was ill." Felix lifted a hand. "An entry may be made by an authorized clerk." "Then why forge my signature?" Eleanor asked. He had no answer. She moved to the burned stationer's receipts. The entries identifying the purchaser of purple logwood ink were destroyed, but the date of the order remains. Mr. Hale read it aloud. "The 17th of April. I had already stopped using that ink. Who received household authority to purchase writing supplies while the late Duke was ill?" Every face turned toward Felix. He smiled coldly. "Authority is not proof of use. No, access alone proves nothing. That is why we will add time, objects, witnesses, and the knowledge required to alter them." Mr. Hale placed the sealed bone button on the memorial tray. Eleanor addressed the valet. "Is that yours?" "No. You wore a servant's coat when you lured Lucy toward the crypt." "I did no such thing." The button was found on the archive stairs. One hole still carries blue silk. Household clothing is repaired with brown thread. Who uses blue? The valet remained silent. Felix answered for him. Hundreds of men use blue thread. Then removing your coat should cause no difficulty. The magistrate ordered the valet to comply. The lowest button on the coat had been replaced with one slightly larger than the others. Around the empty stitch holes remained short ends of bright blue silk. Lucy stood despite the guard's warning. That is the coat the masked man wore. The cuff has the place where I bit him. A healing wound marked the valet's wrist. The magistrate ordered 2 officers to restrain him. Felix did not look at his servant. A valet's crime does not become his master's. Then let us consider what his master knew. Eleanor asked Julian to step forward. Who gave Felix the chapel keys? I did. Who gave him the household seal? I did. Who signed Lucy's travel order after receiving warnings from your father, your wife, and the child herself? Julian's voice lowered. I did. Did Felix require magic to gain control of this house? No, he required my consent. The admission spread through the chapel with more force than any accusation. Julian authenticated his choices, but he did not attempt to interpret Eleanor's evidence or claim credit for her reasoning. Eleanor faced Felix again. You carried the trust chest from the burning gallery. Where was it ordinarily kept? In the dower house. The housekeeper will testify that it was kept in the chapel vestry. The housekeeper rose. Her Grace is correct. You placed the chest inside the fire so you could rescue it publicly, Eleanor said. You expected the forged account book to survive because it was protected by the wood. Felix laughed. And how did I supposedly move it unseen? Through the passage financed with the widow's stolen money. The sexton raised his voice. I saw his valet carrying chests beneath the chapel. When I tried to report it, Lord Felix had me dismissed. Felix pointed at the old man. A thief, seeking revenge. Then explain the brass key, Eleanor said. Mr. Hale placed it beside the button. The late Duke named it 6 months before it appeared on my key ring. It bears white wax identical to that found on the bell rope and on your sleeve. You knew the key had been planted before you pretended to discover it. I recognized a chapel key, nothing more. No, you recognized a key that opens a hidden lock in the eastern crypt wall. Felix's eyes sharpened. Every earlier clue had now led back to the chapel. The wax, the key, the hidden passage, and the changed coffin plate. Eleanor walked toward the bell stairs. The original will is attached to the main bell rope. When I pull it, the document will fall from the 7th coffin. Felix's control finally broke. Do not be absurd, he snapped. The 7th coffin is empty. The release lies behind the bell panel, and it opens the tomb marked with the 3rd Duke's name. Silence consumed the chapel. Eleanor turned slowly. The changed nameplate was known only to the late Duke and the sexton. The burial ledger you stole did not record it. How did you know which tomb the hidden cord would open? Felix realized too late that she had named the wrong coffin deliberately. He lunged toward the bell stairs. Julian blocked him, and the magistrate's officers seized his arms. Eleanor climbed to the bell chamber. She inserted the brass key into the lock behind the panel and pulled the narrow cord. Below, stone ground against stone. A concealed compartment opened beneath the tomb, marked with the 3rd Duke's name. A metal cylinder rolled across the chapel floor and stopped at Lucy's feet. Its green wax seal remained unbroken. Across the cylinder, in the dead Duke's unmistakable hand, were the words, "My final will to be read only after Felix denies knowing this tomb." Mr. Hale lifted the cylinder before the silent assembly. Then he turned it over and saw the 2nd seal pressed into the wax. The 2nd seal belonged to Lucy's mother. It matched the crest engraved inside the girl's silver locket, a small falcon carrying a branch across its wings. Lucy opened the locket before the magistrate. The 2 impressions were identical, down to a tiny break in the falcon's beak. Mr. Hale examined the cylinder. The outer green seal belongs to the late Duke. The inner seal belongs to Lady Lucy's mother. Neither could have been added after the cylinder was placed inside the tomb. Felix struggled against the officers. The seals may be genuine, while the paper inside is false. Then you will have no objection to its being read, Eleanor said. Mr. Hale broke both seals and withdrew 3 documents. The first was the late Duke's final will. It confirmed that Briar Glen belonged to Lucy through her mother's separate marriage settlement and named Eleanor as trustee until the girl reached 21. The second was the original Scottish marriage certificate, preserved before Felix stole the copy hidden behind the painting. The third was a signed statement explaining why the dead Duke had created his elaborate chain of warnings. Mr. Hale read aloud, "My nephew Felix has used my son's grief to turn him against his wife. He intends to make Eleanor appear dishonest, remove Lucy from her protection, and force the sale of Briar Glen through debts Julian will sign without reading." Oh, Julian closed his eyes. The dead Duke's statement continued. "Eleanor warned my son about the physician who treated their child. She was correct. The bottle contained twice the measure, written in the original treatment record. Felix removed that record because Julian's distrust of his wife was the instrument upon which the entire scheme depended." A broken sound escaped Julian's throat. Eleanor remained still, though tears blurred the chapel around her. For 18 months, she had carried the possibility that her refusal had killed her son. The truth did not restore the child, but it released her from the accusation Julian had allowed to become the language of their marriage. Mr. Hale unfolded the treatment record enclosed behind the statement. The physician's prescribed measure was altered after Lady Eleanor objected. The original notation confirms that her intervention may have prolonged the child's life rather than ended it. Julian looked at her. "I blamed you." "Yes." "I let that blame become easier than grieving beside you." "Yes." "And when Felix repeated the same accusation in another form, I chose him because believing you guilty protected me from admitting I had wronged you before." Eleanor did not answer for him. The magistrate turned to Felix. "How did you intend to obtain Briar Glen?" Felix's expression became contemptuous. "You have the papers. Construct whatever story pleases you." Eleanor stepped toward the memorial table. "No, we will construct only what the evidence proves." She held up the brass key. "You planted this on my ring, so its discovery would suggest I possessed secret access to the crypt. Your valet used the hidden passage to remove Lucy's paintings, the stationer's receipts, and Mr. Hale's missing strip. The magistrate indicated the forged account book and the widow's trust. The stolen payments financed the tunnel and concealed chamber," Eleanor said. "Felix copied my signatures in purple logwood ink, then burned the receipts naming the purchaser. He placed the trust chest inside the gallery fire so he could appear to rescue evidence against me." Lucy looked at Felix. "Why did you need my mother's painting?" "The copy of the marriage certificate was hidden behind it," Eleanor explained. Without either certificate, Felix could claim Briar Glen belonged to Julian's estate. Julian's forged loan would then create a default, allowing Felix to purchase the property through the creditors. Mr. Hale placed the burial ledger beside the will. "The valet stole our authenticated evidence at the ferry, and Felix destroyed it, but the original documents in the cylinder established the same facts, independently." The valet's courage failed. "He promised me Briar Glen's stewardship," he said. "He ordered me to plant the key, remove the receipts, set the gallery fire, and frighten the child into surrendering her locket." Felix turned on him. "Coward." "No," Eleanor said. "Only the last man you believed you could use without consequence." The magistrate ordered Felix and his valet taken into custody. Felix would face charges for forgery, theft from the charitable trust, armed abduction, destruction of evidence, conspiracy to defraud a minor, and attempted unlawful seizure of property. The creditors withdrew their claim against Briar Glen. Their agent announced that any loss caused by the fraudulent loan would be pursued against Felix's private assets and the London intermediary who had prepared the papers. But Julian did not escape merely because Felix was guilty. Before the assembled household, he stepped beside Eleanor and placed the chapel keys on the silver tray. "At sunrise yesterday, I accused my wife publicly. I refused her request to examine the evidence. I separated her from Lucy, transferred authority to Felix, and signed documents I had not read. Those were my choices. No manipulation excuses them." He faced the soldier's widow. "The trust will be repaid from my private income, with additional funds sufficient to support every family harmed by the theft." Then he addressed Mr. Hale. "My surrender of the unentailed properties will remain in effect. Independent trustees will administer them until every creditor, tenant, and beneficiary has been protected." Finally, he turned to Lucy. "The guardianship order I signed is revoked. I will petition the court to confirm Eleanor as your sole trustee. I will claim no control over Briar Glen." Lucy took Eleanor's hand. The magistrate formally restored Eleanor's authority over the trust and recognized her rights under the will. Briar Glen would provide her and Lucy with a residence beyond Julian's control, along with income protected by the original settlement. Only after her reputation, property, and guardianship had been restored did Julian speak to her privately. The chapel had emptied. Afternoon light fell across the memorial table where he had demanded her keys the previous morning. "I loved you," he said. "Then I turned my grief into a judgment against you. I do not ask you to forgive that today. You once loved the version of me who never forced you to question yourself. I know. No, Julian, you are beginning to know." He accepted the distinction. "I will make the public corrections. I will repay what was stolen. I will give testimony against Felix, even if it exposes every careless order I signed. And when that is done, I will remain wherever you ask me to remain." Eleanor looked at the man she had married. Remorse had not restored her trust, but for the first time he offered repair without demanding reward. "I am taking Lucy to Briar Glen. I expected you would. You will not follow us." His pain showed, but he bowed his head. "I will not. If, after 1 year, your actions still match the words you spoke today, you may write to me." Julian lifted his eyes. "And if you do not answer, then you will respect the silence." "I will." Eleanor picked up the chapel keys from the silver tray. The first time Julian had demanded them, he had used witnesses to make her powerless. Now, the same witnesses had watched him return everything he had taken. She kept the key to Lucy's trust chest and placed the chapel key in his open palm. "This one belongs to you," she said. "What you do after a door is opened will determine whether you are ever trusted to enter another." Outside, Lucy waited beside the carriage for Briar Glen. Eleanor crossed the chapel threshold freely, carrying the final will in one hand and her niece's hand in the other. Behind her, Julian remained alone before the open door. He did not ask her to turn back, and because he finally released his claim upon her future, Eleanor left him the only thing remorse had earned, not forgiveness, but the right to prove that his repentance could survive her absence. 1 year later, Eleanor returned to the family chapel on the anniversary of the late Duke's death. Julian was standing beside the soldiers' memorial, reading the annual trust report to the widows and their children. He no longer controlled the fund. He delivered the report because Eleanor's trustees required every former administrator to answer publicly for each payment. During the year, he had sold his London house, repaid the stolen pensions, testified against Felix, and surrendered his seat on the county council. He had written no private plea for forgiveness. Once each month, he sent Eleanor a single account of the promises he had fulfilled and never asked her to answer. When the chapel emptied, he found her waiting beside the silver tray. "You came," he said. "I said your actions would decide whether I answered." "And have they?" Eleanor placed the chapel key in his hand. "I cannot return to the marriage we had." Pain crossed his face, but he nodded. "I understand. I would return only to a marriage in which my judgment is heard, my property remains protected, and Lucy is never used to settle another man's pride." Julian closed his fingers around the key. "Those terms are less than you deserve. They are the beginning, not the whole." He looked at her as though afraid hope itself might become another form of entitlement. "May I come to Briar Glen?" Eleanor let the silence test him one final time. "You may come tomorrow as my guest. If you still wish to be my husband, you will court me from the beginning. And this time, you will listen before you ask to be believed." Julian's eyes filled, but he did not reach for her until she offered her hand. He bowed over it. "I will spend the rest of my life earning the door you have opened." Eleanor touched his face. Then, by her own choice, she kissed him. Outside, Lucy rang the chapel bell once. A year earlier, that bell had exposed a grave, a stolen inheritance, and a husband's betrayal. Now, it sounded above an open door as Eleanor and Julian walked toward Briar Glen together. She had not returned because he regretted losing her. She returned because he had finally become a man who understood that love without trust was only another locked room.